Welcome to another AI pattern recognition deep dive.
It's kind of amazing when you stop and think about it. How the human mind does this little trick, probably hundreds of times a day.
What trick is that?
Understanding something totally new by, well, comparing it to something you already know really well. Like when you're wrestling with a big, complicated idea, quantum physics maybe, or how global finance works, you automatically reach for a comparison, right? An analogy. Something familiar to hang the new idea on. We say things like, oh, the brain is like a computer, or the government's budget is like a household budget.
Right, and that instinct, that fundamental way we think using analogies, it's probably the most efficient way we have to transfer knowledge, We use our existing map of the world to figure out new places.
Exactly. But what if? What if we could take that process, that natural human skill, and sort of systematize it? Maybe even supercharge it with artificial intelligence. Go beyond those simple, sometimes kind of flawed analogies we come up with on the fly.
Well, that's pretty much the core idea behind what we're diving into today.
Right. Today we're unpacking ANLG AI. ANLG AI for short. The sources we've looked at are calling it humanity's conceptual translator. Basically, its job is to find these deep structural similarities between totally different areas of knowledge.
And not just find any similarity, but the right one. The one that's perfectly tailored for you. The specific person trying to understand something new, to make something that seems impossible to grasp suddenly click. Make it relatable.
Yeah, and we've got some pretty comprehensive source material for this deep dive. We're looking at how ANLG AI actually works under the hood, its mechanisms.
The technical bits.
Some really surprising ways it's being applied across different fields, from psychology, economics, you name it. And crucially, we're also going to get into the risks. Because relying too much on any metaphor, even a really smart AI-generated one, has its dangers.
Absolutely. It's like we're exploring the map maker, the map they create, and the actual territory itself. All three are important here.
Okay, but before we get lost in the tech specs, let's just ground ourselves for a second. Why is analogy so powerful in the first place? Why does this whole concept even matter? Our sources really highlight a few key cognitive benefits.
Yeah, they do. And first up is just plain cognitive efficiency. Think about learning something dense, really technical, maybe the latest GDPR regulations, right?
Okay, yeah, dry stuff.
Definitely. But if an AI could connect that complex legal structure to, say, the rules of a game you know really well, like chess, your brain doesn't have to build that understanding from absolute scratch.
Okay. It uses paths that are already there.
Exactly. It leverages existing neural pathways, so it takes way less mental energy, less processing power than if you were just trying to memorize a list of definitions.
That makes sense. And saving time isn't the only thing, right? It helps build intuition faster.
Totally. Analogies give you that gut feeling, that sense of how a complex system works. Like if you get how water flows through pipes, pressure, bottlenecks, flow rate, and someone uses that to explain traffic flow, you immediately start thinking, okay, there are going to be jams here, rush hour is like peak pressure. You start making these little predictions before you even see the traffic data.
Right, you transfer the logic.
Yeah.
Which leads directly to better problem solving.
Precisely. You can take a solution that worked in one area, maybe how a biological system keeps itself stable, homeostasis.
Okay.
And you can try applying that same structural solution to a similar problem in a totally different field, like economics or maybe even social dynamics.
Interesting. So it's a way to cross-pollinate ideas.
You got it. And then there's the role of analogy in just plain communication and creativity. Having these shared mental models, even if they're analogies, lets people from different backgrounds talk about the same thing. An engineer and an artist might use different words, but if they have a shared analogy, they're working off the same underlying map.
And finding those unexpected connections, those novel analogies, that's often where innovation comes from, right? Linking two fields that nobody thought were related.
Absolutely. That's the spark. So, okay, it sounds great philosophically, but we need to dig into how. How does this AI actually pull off this conceptual translation job on a technical level?
Okay, let's unpack ANLG AI itself. We're not just talking about a fancy search engine finding similar keywords. This is supposed to be a sophisticated AI framework. So what exactly does it do?
Right. It's not just random comparison. ANLG AI is designed to systematically map the similarities between something Well, that's the source domain, and something new and unfamiliar, the target domain.
Mapping similarities. But what kind of similarity?
It's focused on the abstract, the functional, the relational similarities, how things connect, how they function together, the underlying structure. It's essentially trying to quantify how similar the structures of two different concepts are.
And, like we touched on, a huge piece of this is that it generates personalized analogies. It's not spitting out the same comparison for everyone.
Exactly. That's key. It figures out the analogy that clicks best with your specific mental library. It pulls from concepts you already understand deeply and uses those to explain the new thing you're facing. It's about bridging that gap in understanding that often stops us cold.
And it's not just a one-shot deal, right? The analogies aren't static.
No, that's another critical point. As you start to grasp the new concept, as your understanding gets deeper, maybe you start seeing where the initial analogy doesn't quite fit. The ANLG AI actually evolves the analogy. It might make the first one more complex, add layers, or it might shift to a completely different source concept that's structurally similar but maybe more sophisticated. Or it could even give you a counter-analogy to specifically point out where the first one breaks down.
So it's constantly trying to push you beyond just a surface-level understanding. Okay, this sounds really advanced. Let's get technical. How does it actually do this mapping? What's the mechanism? You mentioned 4 steps.
Yeah, the sources lay out a 4-step process. It begins, logically enough, with step 1, domain analysis.
Okay, what's involved there?
Basically, the AI has to break down both the source domain, the familiar thing, and the target domain, the new thing, into their fundamental parts. It identifies all the components, the relationships between them, the attributes they have, their functions, any cause and effect processes happening.
So if the source was like a car.
Right. It would identify engine, wheels, steering wheel, transmission, but also the relationships. Engine burns fuel. Fuel combustion causes piston movement. Transmission transfers power to wheels. Wheels rotating causes forward motion. It needs to know all the pieces and exactly how they interact, almost like a mathematical blueprint.
Okay, comprehensive breakdown. What's step 2?
Step 2 is where the real magic and probably the heavy computation happens, relational alignment.
Relational alignment. Sounds important.
It is, because this is where the AI shows its sophistication. It deliberately ignores superficial similarities, like whether two things look alike. Instead, it laser focuses on deep structural similarity. It cares about whether the relationships between the components are basically the same, topologically speaking.
Topologically. Okay, so it's about the pattern of connections.
Exactly. Think of it like graph theory. The technical papers hint at this. Each concept or component is a node in a network, and each relationship causes is part of, controls is a connecting line, an edge.
Right.
To find an alignment, ANLG AI compares the shape of these two knowledge graphs. It's looking for patterns.
So it's not looking for the word engine in the target domain. It's looking for a node that has the same kind of connections, like receives input from component X and provides power to component Y.
Precisely. If component A causes component B in the source, it looks for component C causing component D in the target, even if A and C are totally different things. Maybe A is increased demand and C is viral load. The relationship is the key.
That's how you could map, say, water flow restrictions in plumbing to an interest rate hike in finance, because the relationship restricts flow activity is structurally similar.
You got it. That's the power of relational alignment. So once it finds these structural parallels and quantifies them, it gives them a score based on how well they match and how familiar the source domain is likely to be for you.
Okay.
Then comes step 3, inference generation. This is where the knowledge transfer happens. The AI uses the known behaviors of the familiar source domain to make educated guesses or inferences about the unfamiliar target domain.
So if the source system, because of its structure, always breaks down under certain conditions.
Right. The AI predicts a similar potential failure point in the target system, or if the source system has a critical dependency, it suggests looking for a similar dependency in the target. This could actually speed up scientific research, suggesting new hypotheses.
That's pretty powerful. And step 4, you mentioned something about safety.
Yes. Step 4 is analogy refinement. And this is absolutely crucial for avoiding misunderstandings. The system doesn't just highlight the similarities, it explicitly points out where the analogy breaks down.
Ah, the limits of the comparison.
Exactly. It has to say, okay, the connection works perfectly here, but warning, this aspect is fundamentally different between the two. The map is not the territory. It might even suggest a different analogy specifically to cover that breakdown point.
Okay, that feels really important. Let's make this concrete. The sources used a great example. explaining quantum entanglement using a dance partnership.
Yeah, that's a classic mind-bending concept meets something relatable example. Entanglement is our target domain notoriously weird. The source domain is two dancers in a very connected, maybe even slightly spooky partnership.
So walk us through the 4 steps there.
Okay. Step 1, domain analysis. In the quantum world, you've got two particles, their spin states, the act of measuring them, and the fact that distance doesn't seem to matter. In the dance world, you've got two dancers, their coordinated movements, choreography, observing their performance, and the dynamic of their relationship.
Got it. Components identified. Step 2, relational alignment.
This is where it gets interesting. The two quantum particles map to the two dancers. The entanglement itself maps to their deep connection, their shared choreography.
And the weird part of entanglement. Measuring one particle instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. How does the dance analogy handle that?
That's the core structural parallel. The analogy maps it like this. Watching one dancer, observing their performance, instantly changes or reveals something about the performance of the other dancer, even if they're on opposite sides of the stage, because they share this hidden connection, this choreography.
Okay, so the relationship, the choreography is what links them, not physical closeness. That mirrors the distance, irrelevance in entanglement.
Exactly. The inference generated, step 3, is that you have to think about the system, the dance pair, the entangled particles, as a single whole, not just two separate things.
And the crucial step 4, refinement. Where does the dance analogy break down?
Right away, the AI has to flag it. Warning. This analogy helps understand the instantaneous correlation, but dancers are conscious beings making choices based on choreography. Quantum particles are not conscious. Their connection is based on quantum probability, not intention or will.
Ah, okay. So it prevents you from thinking the particles want to be linked. That's critical.
It stops you from anthropomorphizing, which would be a huge misunderstanding of the physics.
That definitely makes a baffling concept feel more graspable. But it brings up something else. Why dancers? Why not, I don't know, 2 linked gears or 2 birds flying in formation? The choice of dancers feels specific, targeted.
And that leads us perfectly into the next major piece of ANLG AI, because you hit the nail on the head. That choice is specific. It's the absolute core of what makes ANLG AI supposedly revolutionary. The sources hammer this point home. The system doesn't just create one-size-fits-all analogies like brain is a computer.
Because those often don't work that well for everyone.
Exactly. An analogy only truly lands, only really helps you understand if the source domain, the thing you're comparing to, is something you personally know inside and out, something that resonates deeply. So ANLG AI's output has to be personalized, custom-tailored.
So it's building a profile of the user, trying to map out your conceptual landscape to find the best hook.
That's the idea. It's constantly learning about you based on, well, the sources list 6 main factors it uses to tailor the analogy just for you.
6 factors. Okay, what's number 1?
The foundation is your individual knowledge base. What do you already know really well? What are your areas of expertise? Are you deep into history, literature? Maybe you're an engineer. Or perhaps you're an avid gardener.
So if I know a lot about gardening.
Then the AI will actively look for source analogies related to plants, soil science, ecosystems, seasonal growth cycles. Because those concepts are already deeply embedded in your experience. They're live concepts for you.
Makes sense. Use what's already strong. What's next?
Second is your cultural context and professional background. This is a huge filter. An analogy that works brilliantly for a software developer might be completely meaningless to, say, a farmer or a musician.
Right. Different worlds, different base knowledge.
Totally different. Your job, your cultural upbringing provides a rich set of deeply understood models. The AI tries to tap into that for maximum resonance. And this is vital for making it work across different cultures, avoiding analogies that just don't translate.
Okay. Third factor.
Your learning style. Does the system detect that you respond better to visual information? Maybe analogies with strong spatial elements or imagery? Or are you more kinesthetic? You learn by doing, so analogies based on physical action or movement work best.
Like feeling the forces involved?
Exactly. Or maybe you're more of an abstract thinker, comfortable with conceptual or even philosophical comparisons. A visual learner might grasp market volatility through a graph, a kinesthetic learner through a roller coaster ride analogy, and an abstract thinker maybe through chaos theory concepts.
Tailoring the type of analogy. Interesting. What's number 4? This one sounds tricky.
Yeah, number 4 is your current emotional state. The sources say ANLG AI uses proxies, maybe interaction speed, error rates, to gauge if you're feeling stressed or cognitively overloaded.
Why does that matter for analogy?
Because if you're stressed, maybe cramming for a test or a big presentation, you need simpler, clearer, less demanding analogies. Your brain doesn't have the bandwidth for complexity. But if you're relaxed, curious, just exploring.
You can handle something more intricate.
Exactly. You can grapple with a more layered metaphor, maybe one that even includes contradictions or nuance. The system tries to dynamically adjust the complexity based on your likely mental state.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty sophisticated. What are the last two factors?
Fifth is age and developmental stage. Pretty straightforward analogies for a 10-year-old learning about economics need to be different from those for a grad student.
Sure.
And six is basically the system learning about you over time. It tracks which kinds of analogies you respond well to based on your feedback, how you interact with them, whether you seem to successfully apply the knowledge later. If metaphors drawn from history always seem to click for you, the AI will lean more heavily on historical source domains in the future.
It learns your learning preferences. Okay, this personalization engine sounds powerful. Let's make it real. The sources used a great case study explaining blockchain technology. That's something a lot of people find confusing. How does ANLG AI explain it differently depending on the user?
Right. Let's take 3 different users. First, a librarian. The core concepts of blockchain we need to get across are distribution, immutability, unchangeability, and the chronological chain.
Okay. How does it translate for the librarian?
It maps blockchain onto a system they know intimately, a library catalog system. The distributed ledger part is explained like this. Imagine every library patron, not just the head librarian, has a complete, identical, constantly updated copy of the entire library catalog.
Ah, okay. Everyone has the record.
Exactly. So when a transaction happens, a book is checked out, a new one added every single copy of the catalog updates instantly and identically. No single person can secretly change a record because everyone else's copy would prove it wrong.
And the blocks, the chain.
Blocks are like the individual pages in the catalog. The chain is the sequence of pages chronologically ordered, maybe linked by reference numbers pointing back to the previous page. It taps right into their understanding of record integrity, verification, and information architecture.
That works. Okay, now contrast that with a musician. Same blockchain concepts, different person.
For the musician, the AI taps into their understanding of creative collaboration. It maps blockchain to a collaborative musical composition.
Yeah.
Distribution means every musician involved has the complete, perfect, up-to-the-minute score. Immutability means once a section of the music, let's call it a movement, that's the block is finished, agreed upon, and performed, it's set in stone. It's recorded. You can't go back and change it.
You can only add the next movement.
Exactly. You can only add new movements that build upon and reference the previous ones, creating the chronological chain. It emphasizes consensus, the history of the performance, the integrity of the piece over time. A musician instantly gets why you can't just insert a new bar into the middle of a finished symphony. That connects to the cryptographic linking of blocks.
Clever. Okay, one more. A chef. How does blockchain translate for them?
For a chef, it's all about process, recipes, and shared knowledge. So blockchain becomes a shared, magical recipe book.
Magical.
Well, in the sense that every chef in the collaboration has an identical copy. And when one chef creates a new verified recipe, a transaction, everyone's book updates automatically and instantly.
Okay. And the recipes are the blocks.
Sort of. The recipes themselves are like transactions. Maybe a whole cookbook edition is the block. The key is, recipes often build on previous ones. They reference techniques or components from earlier recipes in the book. That forms the chain.
And immutability.
If a chef tries to suddenly claim they invented a classic dish that's already clearly recorded in an earlier edition of the cookbook, an earlier block, well, everyone else's identical book proves them wrong. It uses the logic of culinary tradition, provenance, dating, community verification to explain things like hashing and consensus.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive. The same core ideas, distribution, immutability, linking, are perfectly preserved, but the surface is completely different for each person. Librarian, musician, chef.
Exactly. The AI is basically speaking the user's native conceptual language. It ensures the new information doesn't just get stored as a fact, but actually connects with their intuition, with how they already understand the world.
This ability to keep the underlying structure the same while changing the surface details, that seems to unlock something even bigger for ANLG AI. The sources talk about it recognizing these universal patterns, right? structural similarities that pop up again and again in totally different fields.
Yeah, that's where it gets really fascinating. It starts seeing the same fundamental dynamics playing out in biology, then in physics, then in finance, then maybe in human psychology or politics. It's connecting dots across domains that we normally keep very separate.
This is the real deep dive part. Let's start with human behavior patterns. The forces highlight a really powerful analogy using physics to understand something deeply psychological: addiction as a gravitational well.
Right, and this isn't just a casual, oh, it's hard to escape. It's mapping the actual dynamics of forces. The addiction is described as being like a massive object creating a deep warp in space-time, a gravitational well.
Okay, so the stronger the addiction.
The deeper the well. And the depth of the well directly relates to the amount of energy, effort, support, therapy needed to reach escape velocity, to get out.
So the longer someone's been addicted or the more severe it is, the harder it is to break free. That makes intuitive sense. What about relapse?
Relapse is explained using orbital mechanics. Maybe you manage to pull away from the center a bit, you achieve an orbit, but if you haven't actually reached escape velocity, the gravitational pull eventually brings you back down into the depths. You fall back into orbit or crash back down.
So it reframes relapse not as a total failure, but as insufficient energy applied to overcome the pull.
Exactly. It shifts it from a purely moral failing to a structural one. The system of the addiction just had too strong a pull for the escape energy applied at that time. The sources even talk about an event horizon, a point of severity where escape might be practically impossible without significant external help, like needing a huge rocket booster to even get off the launch pad.
Wow. Okay, the practical implications of that analogy seem huge for how we approach treatment.
Absolutely. It immediately challenges that simplistic idea of why don't they just stop? You can't just wish yourself out of a powerful gravitational field. It emphasizes why early intervention is so important. Escaping a shallow well takes exponentially less energy.
And support isn't just niceness, it's actual energy input.
It's the rocket boost. It's a necessary force, not just a side benefit to willpower, which might already be depleted by the struggle.
And the personalization works here too. How does this analogy change for different people?
Oh, yeah. For a physics student, the AI might lean into the actual math, talking about force vectors, escape velocity calculations, the shape of elliptical orbits. Really technical.
Okay.
But for a mountain climber, the analogy shifts. It becomes about climbing out of a deep, treacherous canyon. Escape requires specific gear, support systems, established routes, treatment plans, recognizing that setting up belays or taking rests, managing energy, is part of the process, not a sign of weakness.
Same core idea, requires external tools and energy management, but different imagery.
Exactly. And for an ocean swimmer, maybe the analogy is getting caught in a powerful riptide. The structure is the same, an overwhelming external force pulling you away from safety.
And the solution in a riptide isn't to fight it head on.
Right. You don't swim directly against it. That just exhausts you, pure willpower. You swim parallel to the shore, strategic action therapy techniques, until you're out of the strongest part of the current, then you can head to safety. The core insight strategic application of force beats brute strength remains, but the source domain is completely adapted.
That's really compelling, taking physics down to the individual mind.
Oh.
Okay, let's scale way up. How does ANLG AI use these pattern-finding skills to understand society? The sources talked about social and political patterns. The big one was democracy as an ecosystem.
Yeah, this is a rich one. The idea is that a healthy, functioning democracy has structural parallels to a thriving natural ecosystem.
How so? What maps to what?
Well, first, you need biodiversity. In political terms, that translates to ideological diversity, a range of viewpoints and parties. The sources argue that political monocultures where only one way of thinking dominates are inherently fragile. Like a field planted with only one crop, they're easily wiped out by a single disease or unexpected stress.
Okay, diversity equals resilience. What else?
Think about nutrient cycles in an ecosystem. That's like the information flow in a democracy. Ideas, facts, data, they all need to circulate freely and efficiently to keep the system healthy.
And where does something like journalism fit in?
Investigative journalism maps beautifully onto the decomposers, the fungi and bacteria in an ecosystem. Their job is to break down dead or harmful material corruption, lies, misinformation, outdated policies, and return the useful components back into the soil for new growth.
So if the decomposers aren't working well,
the system gets clogged with toxic waste, which makes misinformation the equivalent of pollution. It gums up the works, poisons the information flow, makes it hard for healthy new ideas or policies to take root. It gives a strong biological argument for why a free and functioning press is vital.
That's a powerful image. What about checks and balances?
That maps to the predator-prey balance. Think of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. In a healthy system, they keep each other in check, preventing any one branch from becoming too powerful, like predators keeping the herbivore population from exploding and destroying the environment. Remove one, and the whole system risks collapse or overpopulation tyranny by the remaining branch.
And threats to the system.
Authoritarian movements are framed as invasive species. They often come in, disrupt the existing balance, outcompete the native democratic ideas using aggressive tactics, maybe target the decomposers first, and consume resources, public trust, institutional integrity very quickly. They require active management to prevent them from taking over the entire ecosystem.
Okay, that ecosystem analogy is comprehensive. The sources also mention another political pattern insight, using physics again, polarization as magnetic sorting.
Right. This one views society in a non-polarized state as having lots of little individual magnetic domains, people's opinions, affiliations, all pointing in random directions, diverse, disordered.
Okay, then what causes polarization?
An external magnetic field. This represents things like highly partisan media, social media echo chambers, strong tribalist rhetoric forces that constantly push individuals to align themselves in one of two opposite directions.
So people's opinions start lining up, pointing either north or south, metaphorically speaking.
Exactly. That's polarization. But the really critical insight ANLG AI highlights here, according to the sources, is that this isn't usually a slow, gradual slide. It's more like a phase transition.
A phase transition, like water freezing into ice.
Precisely. Water stays liquid, fluid, diverse, right up until it hits that critical freezing point. Then, boom, the change happens relatively quickly and system-wide, locking into a rigid structure. The idea is that society might absorb a lot of polarizing pressure, but then reach a tipping point where it snaps into a highly polarized state.
That suggests trying to fix it with small, incremental changes might not work.
That's the implication. If you're dealing with a phase transition, small nudges might not be enough energy to reverse it. The AI suggests two main approaches based on the physics. One, reduce the strength of the external magnetic field. That means tackling partisan media, maybe regulating algorithms that create echo chambers.
Weaken the polarizing force. What's the other approach?
Introduce heat into the system. In social terms, heat means things that disrupt the rigid alignment. Productive dialogue across divides, empowering voices that aren't strongly aligned with either pole, creating more randomness and fluidity in the system. Enough heat can melt the polarized structure back into a more diverse liquid state.
Fascinating. Using physics principles to suggest social interventions. Okay, let's shift domains again. Health and biology patterns. The big analogy here was the immune system as national defense.
Yes, and this one is great because it's multi-layered. It maps different parts of the immune system to different branches of a national defense force, making incredibly complex cellular interactions understandable.
So where does it start? The borders.
Exactly. The skin and mucosal barriers, the body's first line of defense, map directly to border security. Walls, checkpoints, patrols trying to keep invaders out in the first place.
But invaders sometimes get through. What happens then?
Then you get the first response team. The innate immune system. This is mapped to emergency services, police, firefighters, maybe SWAT teams. They respond fast to any breach, but in a somewhat general way.
Like inflammation.
Inflammation is the alarm bell ringing, and cells like macrophages and neutrophils are the first responders rushing to the scene. They recognize broad categories of threats, bacteria, virus, but they don't have specific memory of past encounters. Quick, but not specialized.
Okay, so who are the specialists?
That's the adaptive immune system. This maps beautifully to the intelligence agencies and special forces.
How so?
Think of B cells as the intelligence analysts. They identify a specific invader, a particular strain of virus, for example. They gather intel and then produce highly specific wanted posters. Those are the antibodies.
Okay. And who acts on those wanted posters?
The T cells. They're like the special forces. Some T cells are helpers coordinating the overall defense strategy, while others are killer T cells that hunt down and eliminate cells that have already been infected by that specific enemy identified by the B cells.
And the immune system remembers threats.
All right, yes. That's the crucial part of adaptive immunity. Memory cells are like the intelligence agency's archives and contingency plans. They remember the specific invaders encountered before, so if the same enemy shows up again years later, the response is incredibly fast and powerful.
This analogy doesn't just explain how it works, but also what happens when it goes wrong.
Exactly. It clarifies pathologies brilliantly. Autoimmune disease becomes like a civil war or friendly fire incident where the defense forces mistakenly attack the body's own citizens.
Ouch. What about immunodeficiency, like with HIV?
That's like having a severely defunded or disabled defense force. You don't have enough troops or resources to fight off even relatively minor threats, leading to opportunistic infections taking over.
And allergies. I suffer from those. What's my immune system doing?
According to this analogy, your defense forces are overreacting massively to non-threats, treating harmless pollen like it's a major invasion, launching a huge resource-intensive counterattack, inflammation, sneezing, etc., against something that poses no real danger.
Okay, that actually makes sense. My body's defense budget is going towards fighting dust bunnies.
Pretty much. And the practical value here, especially for public health, is huge. Think about explaining vaccines.
How does the analogy help there?
It makes vaccine function completely intuitive. A vaccine isn't the disease, it's a training exercise for your national defense. It's like giving your intelligence agency, B cells, safe access to the enemy's blueprints, inactivated virus or mRNA instructions, so they can develop the wanted posters, antibodies, and train the special forces, T cells, before the actual invasion happens. It removes the fear and highlights the preparation aspect.
That's a much better framing. Okay, drastic shift again. Economic patterns. How does ANLG AI see economies?
It often sees them as analogous to biological systems, particularly the economy as a circulatory system.
Okay, I think I can see where this is going. Money is.
Money is blood. It has to circulate efficiently to reach and nourish all parts of the economy. If it doesn't circulate, things start to die off.
Businesses, industries.
They're the organs. Each one performs vital functions. If a major organ fails, say, a major industry or bank collapses, it threatens the health of the entire system. And the financial institutions, the banks, they're the heart, the central pump that keeps the blood money moving. A financial crisis is like a heart attack.
So what does something like wealth concentration look like in this analogy, when money pools in just a few places?
That maps directly to edema, swelling caused by trapped fluid, or blood clotting. The blood isn't circulating properly. It gets stuck in one area, starving other areas, other sectors of the economy, lower income groups, of necessary resources. This leads to tissue death, unemployment, lack of opportunity, recession in those starved parts.
That's a pretty stark image. What about the government's role?
The government, particularly the central bank, acts like the bone marrow. It can produce new blood cells, create new money when needed, but it's a balancing act.
How so?
Produce too much money too quickly, and you get hyperinflation, like having way too many red blood cells, making the blood thick and sludgy. Don't produce enough during a crisis, and you risk deflation or worsening a recession. That's like being anemic, not having enough blood to function.
And taxes.
Taxation functions like the kidneys or liver, the body's filtration system. It removes waste products from circulation, maybe things like excessive speculation or extreme wealth concentration that isn't being productively reinvested, and ideally returns those resources back into circulation where they're needed, perhaps through public spending.
Okay, this circulatory analogy seems to have direct implications for economic policy debates.
Absolutely. The sources point out one key application. It clearly shows why austerity policies during a recession are often structurally damaging.
Austerity being cutting government spending, raising taxes, trying to reduce debt during a downturn.
Exactly. In the circulatory analogy, a recession is like the body being in shock or suffering from severe anemia, not enough blood circulating. Austerity in that situation is like trying to treat the patient by bleeding them further. It reduces circulation even more, potentially accelerating the collapse. This highlights a key point we'll come back to: the danger of using the wrong analogy, like the household budget one.
Right, because a household can't print blood, but a government can influence the money supply. Okay, one last major pattern area. Environmental patterns, specifically climate change. How does ANLG AI frame that?
The most effective analogy the sources mention here uses simple mechanics. Climate change as bathtub dynamics.
The bathtub. Okay, explain.
It's simple but structurally very accurate. The faucet pouring water into the tub represents human-caused carbon emissions going into the atmosphere.
Okay, emissions in. What's the drain?
The drain represents the Earth's natural carbon sinks, forests, oceans, soil that absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere.
And the water level in the tub.
That's the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, the total amount that's accumulated up there. The size of the tub itself is like the planet's capacity to handle CO2 without catastrophic climate effects.
So the problem isn't just how fast the faucet is running.
Exactly. That's the key insight. The problem is accumulation. Even if we turn the faucet down a bit, if the water flowing in is still faster than the water flowing out through the drain, the water level keeps rising. The tub keeps filling up.
We focus a lot on emission rates, but this highlights the total amount already in the atmosphere.
Precisely. So to stop the tub from overflowing, you have to do two things simultaneously. Turn the faucet way down, reduce emissions, and make sure the drain is working as well as possible, or even enhance it, protect and restore natural sinks.
And net zero emissions. What's that in bathtub terms?
Net zero is simply the point where the flow rate from the faucet exactly equals the flow rate out through the drain. At that point, the water level stops rising. It stabilizes.
But if the tub is already dangerously full, or even overflowing, just reaching net zero isn't enough, right?
Right. If the water level is already causing damage, stabilizing it isn't sufficient. You actually need to start actively bailing water out of the tub. That maps to technologies like carbon capture and removal, an extra step needed in addition to reducing the inflow. That simple bathtub analogy makes the whole complex structure of climate goals reduction, sinks, net zero carbon removal instantly graspable for almost anyone. So we've seen these amazing analogies for specific problems, but ANLG AI goes a step further. It starts to recognize these universal patterns, these sort of meta-analogies that show up everywhere. It connects the dots between your own learning process, the economy, biology.
Okay, like fundamental shapes or dynamics that repeat. What's the first big one?
The first major one is the growth curve, often called the S curve. You see this shape absolutely everywhere.
Where?
Bacterial growth in a petri dish follows an S curve. The adoption rate of a new technology like smartphones follows an S curve. How ideas spread through a population often follows an S curve. Even how you learn a new complex skill
Follows an S curve. How does that look?
It typically starts slow. You put in effort, but progress feels minimal. Then you hit an inflection point, and suddenly you're learning rapidly. Things are clicking. It's the steep part of the S. Finally, as you approach mastery, the rate of improvement slows down again, and you plateau. Slow start, rapid growth, then leveling off.
Okay, I recognize that feeling when learning something new. How does ANLG AI use this pattern?
It uses it to manage expectations and encourage persistence. Say you're learning, I don't know, coding, and you're stuck in that frustrating, slow beginning phase. The AI can tell you, look, based on this universal S-curve pattern seen in everything from biology to tech adoption, you're not failing. You're in the predictable slow start phase. Keep putting in the effort and expect the rapid acceleration phase soon.
It normalizes the struggle. Does it use a specific analogy for that initial difficulty?
Yeah, a powerful one is comparing it to a rocket needing most of its fuel just for liftoff. Getting started, overcoming that initial inertia, takes a disproportionate amount of energy. Those tough early stages don't reflect how easy or fast things will feel later on. It reframes the struggle as just part of the physics of learning, which can be incredibly motivating.
That's useful. Okay, what's the second universal pattern?
Feedback loops. These are the engines driving change or stability in almost any system.
Feedback loops. Like cause and effect circling back on itself.
Exactly. They can be positive feedback loops, which amplify change and push a system towards an extreme. Think of the greenhouse effect. Warming melts ice. Less ice reflects less sunlight. More heat is absorbed, causing more warming.
Right.
It spirals.
Okay, an amplifying cycle. Wealth concentration can be like that too, right?
Yeah.
More money lets you make even more money.
Precisely. Or social polarization, tribal rhetoric, makes people retreat to their side, which feels more extreme rhetoric. Those are positive amplifying loops, but you also have negative feedback loops.
And those do the opposite. They stabilize things.
Yes. Negative feedback loops work to bring a system back to a set point or equilibrium. Think of a thermostat in your house. If it gets too cold, the thermostat turns the heat on. Once it reaches the target temperature, it turns the heat off. It constantly counteracts deviations. That's how biological homeostasis works, too, keeping your body temperature stable.
Okay, amplifying loops, push to extremes, stabilizing loops maintain balance. How does ANLG AI apply this understanding?
It applies it to things like personal psychology. Take anxiety, for instance. The AI can explain how anxiety often traps people in a positive, amplifying feedback loop.
No.
Worrying about something leads to avoiding the situation. Avoiding it means your skills or confidence in handling it might decrease, atrophy. That skill decrease then leads to more worry the next time you face it. Worry, avoidance, skill loss, more worry. It's a spiral.
Just like the greenhouse effect spiral. Okay, so how does understanding the loop help?
Because the solution becomes clear, you need to break the positive amplifying loop by introducing negative stabilizing feedback. Instead of avoidance, the AI might suggest taking very small, manageable actions related to the feared situation.
Tiny steps.
Tiny steps. Because small actions can lead to small successes. Small successes build a little confidence. That confidence slightly reduces the worry. It's like nudging the thermostat. By taking action, you introduce feedback that counteracts the worry spiral, stabilizing the system over time. It connects your personal mental struggle to these fundamental systemic dynamics you see everywhere.
Linking the personal to the universal. Okay, these patterns are fascinating. How is ANLG AI actually being deployed? What are the real-world applications and maybe even the jobs being created around it?
Right, it's moving beyond theory. The sources highlight several key implementations. First up is ANLG Learn, which is basically a personalized education platform.
Using these tailored analogies to teach.
Exactly. It assesses what a student already knows deeply, then generates custom analogies for tricky new concepts. We talked about the calculus example.
Right, the derivative as flavor intensity for a chef.
Precisely. Instead of just abstract math, it connects the rate of change to how much difference adding a pinch of salt makes at different stages of seasoning a soup. High sensitivity, big flavor change at the start. Low sensitivity, barely noticeable change when it's already salty, makes the derivative concept instantly intuitive for that specific student.
And this creates new roles.
Yeah, roles like analogy curriculum designers who figure out how to structure entire courses around these personalized mappings, and knowledge domain mappers whose job is to refine how the AI understands and categorizes different areas of human expertise to feed the personalization engine.
Okay, education. What's next?
MedTranslate. This is focused on improving communication between doctors and patients.
Tackling medical jargon.
Exactly. Taking complex diagnoses or treatment plans and translating them into analogies the patient can actually grasp and relate to. This improves understanding, reduces fear, and can even help with treatment adherence.
We had the multiple sclerosis example earlier.
Right. Explaining MS to a teacher by comparing the nerve damage to the insulation fraying on electrical wires in a school. First, flickering lights, early symptoms, then short circuits, progressive symptoms. It uses their familiar world to explain the unfamiliar pathology.
And the new jobs here.
Medical analogy specialists, people who work with both clinicians and the AI to craft and deliver these explanations effectively, ensuring they're accurate, sensitive, and truly helpful for the patient.
Makes sense. What else?
Policy parse. This is aimed at making complex government policies or legislation understandable to the general public.
Lord knows we need that. How does it work?
It takes a dense policy proposal, say a carbon tax, and translates it into a familiar structure. For example, it might say, a carbon tax is structurally like a sin tax on cigarettes.
Ah, okay. That immediately brings certain ideas to mind.
Right. It instantly highlights the potential benefits, discouraging the harmful activity, generating revenue for alternatives, but also the potential downsides. It might disproportionately affect lower income groups, the regressive aspect. It surfaces the core trade-offs quickly using a familiar framework.
And the jobs.
Policy analogy translators, obviously, but also maybe civic engagement facilitators who use these AI-generated analogies in town halls or online forums to help bridge the gap between expert policy wonks and the citizens affected by the policies.
Okay, one more application area.
Mind map analogy, which is designed for use in therapy and mental health support.
Helping people understand their own minds better.
Exactly. Helping clients grasp abstract psychological concepts, defense mechanisms, cognitive distortions, attachment styles by mapping them onto more concrete, personalized analogies. It also helps generate analogies for coping strategies that might resonate more deeply.
You mentioned one earlier for obsessive thoughts.
Yeah, the obsessive thoughts as website pop-up ads analogy, maybe for someone who spends a lot of time online.
Right, clicking the ad, engaging with the thought, just makes more ads appear.
Precisely. The compulsion, the arguing with the thought is like clicking the ad. It tells the algorithm of your mind that this content is relevant, so it sends more. The therapeutic approach, acceptance and commitment therapy, for instance, is about learning not to click. Noticing the ad is there, letting it be, but not engaging. Over time, the algorithm learns you're not clicking, and the frequency of the pop-ups, obsessive thoughts, can decrease.
That makes the therapeutic strategy much clearer. New jobs.
You could see psychological analogy therapists, emerging therapists who are skilled at using this AI tool to find the most resonant and effective analogies to help clients understand their patterns and accelerate therapeutic progress.
Wow. Education, medicine, policy, therapy. It really does seem like this isn't just a niche tool. It's potentially becoming a fundamental layer for communication wherever there's complexity or an expertise gap.
That seems to be the trajectory, yes. Making the incomprehensible comprehensible across the board. Okay, but we have to pump the brakes a little. This all sounds incredibly powerful, almost magical, and the benefits are clear: faster learning, better memory, transferring insights, engaging people emotionally, making knowledge accessible.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but, especially with powerful AI. Our sources are very clear that we need to be acutely aware of the significant risks and limitations here.
Because analogies, even smart AI ones, aren't perfect representations of reality. Which brings us to the first major risk: false equivalence.
Exactly. This is the big philosophical trap. Every single analogy, no matter how good, eventually breaks down. Why? Because the map is not the territory. The comparison is not the real thing.
And if people rely too heavily on the analogy, if they forget it's just a comparison,
They get misled. They start thinking the new, complex thing is exactly like the familiar thing in all respects, and that can lead to serious misunderstandings. It's the seduction of simplicity.
the classic example here is the brain is computer analogy, right?
Perfect example. It's helpful to get started: inputs, processing, outputs, memory, but it breaks down very quickly and dangerously if you push it too far.
How so?
Well, computers run on precise digital logic. They're largely deterministic. Brains are messy, analog, operate on probabilities, and are far from deterministic. Computer memory is stored in specific locations and retrieved perfectly or not at all. Human memory is reconstructive. We literally rewrite our memories slightly every time we recall them. It's fluid, context-dependent.
So if you take the computer analogy too literally,
You might think you can just delete a bad memory, like a file, or that mental fatigue is just like running out of RAM and can be fixed by rebooting. It leads to a fundamentally wrong understanding of how minds and emotions actually work and could steer people away from therapies that are based on how brains function.
so how does ANLG AI try to handle this risk? You mentioned the refinement step.
Yes, that analogy refinement, step 4, is the primary mitigation. The AI is explicitly programmed not just to find similarities, but also to flag the differences. To say, okay, useful comparison up to this point, but warning, brains are not digital, memory is reconstructive. Do not equate neuronal firing with binary code. It has to actively point out the boundaries of the map.
Okay, that's crucial. What's the second major limitation?
Cultural bias in analogies. This is a big one. Analogies inherently rely on the listener having a shared understanding of the source concept, but that shared understanding is often culturally specific or based on privilege.
How does that play out?
Well, take the analogy often used in political science. Democracy is a marketplace of ideas. That comparison assumes the listener is deeply familiar and comfortable with Western concepts of free markets, competition, supply, and demand.
Which might not be universal.
Not at all. In cultures that prioritize consensus or have different economic models or perhaps view markets negatively, that analogy might be confusing, alienating, or even offensive. It requires specific cultural capital to get it.
What's another example?
The sources mention life is a journey. This is everywhere in Western self-help and pop psychology. But think about it, it assumes the privilege of mobility, of being able to choose your path, explore new directions.
Which isn't true for everyone.
Not for someone constrained by severe illness, poverty, or strict political borders. For them, the journey metaphor might feel completely out of reach, exclusionary, even mocking their reality.
So the analogies themselves can carry hidden biases or assumptions. How does ANLG AI deal with that?
The main approach is that detailed cultural context assessment during the personalization phase. It tries to understand the user's background and actively avoids analogies that rely too heavily on specific cultural knowledge, like obscure sports metaphors, or socioeconomic privilege, like analogies assuming frequent international travel or expensive hobbies, unless the user's profile strongly indicates that's their world.
So it might generate different analogies for the same concept depending on cultural context.
Ideally, yes. It should aim for culturally sensitive frameworks, perhaps drawing from local folklore, common trades, or universal natural phenomena where possible, rather than defaulting to globally dominant but culturally specific sources.
Okay. Third big risk. This one sounds particularly dangerous.
It is. It's the oversimplification risk, which can easily lead to the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger. That's thinking you know more than you actually do.
Exactly. By making a really complex topic seem simple and understandable through a neat analogy, ANLG AI risks creating false confidence. People grasp the analogy, feel like they've understood the whole complex issue, but they only have a surface-level comprehension.
And that can lead to bad decisions or flawed analysis.
Absolutely. The most damaging example the sources cite, which we touched on earlier, is the analogy of the national economy as a household budget.
Right. Seems intuitive, but it's wrong.
Dangerously wrong. It's compelling because everyone understands managing household finances, but applying that logic to a national economy ignores fundamental differences.
Like the government being able to issue currency, which households can't.
Exactly. And the nature of sovereign debt is completely different from household debt. A household going into debt to buy a bigger TV is very different from a government going into debt to invest in infrastructure or education during a recession.
And yet, that household budget analogy is used all the time in politics.
Constantly. And it has historically been used to justify really harmful austerity policies during economic downturns. We have to tighten our belts, just like a family would.
But as the circulatory system analogy showed us, doing that during a recession is like bleeding an anemic patient. It makes things worse.
Precisely. The simple, intuitive household analogy leads to policy that is structurally disastrous, whereas the slightly more complex but structurally more accurate circulatory system analogy suggests the opposite stimulus, not austerity. This shows how a seemingly harmless oversimplification can have devastating real-world consequences.
So how does ANLG AI fight this Dunning-Kruger risk?
It uses a combination of things. First, issuing explicit warnings alongside analogies known to be highly reductive. Warning. This comparison helps with concept X, but fails completely on aspects Y and Z, which are critical for policy decisions.
Okay. What else?
Using progressive deepening. Start with the simple analogy, but immediately follow up with layers of complexity, caveats, and pointing out where it deviates from reality. Don't let the user rest on the simple version for too long.
Keep pushing them deeper.
Exactly. And finally, the system should ideally test for conceptual understanding, not just whether the user remembers the analogy. Can they apply the actual concept in a new, non-analogous situation? Can they articulate the limits of the comparison? That's the true test of understanding, not just repeating the metaphor.
It sounds like a constant balancing act. Make it accessible, but not so accessible that it becomes misleadingly simple.
That's the tightrope walk, yes. Essential for using this powerful tool responsibly. #tag outro.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've journeyed through the really intricate world of ANLG AI, this system being called humanity's conceptual translator. It's pretty revolutionary, isn't it? Taking that ancient human tool, the analogy, and making it systematic, deeply personal, and incredibly refined.
It really is. And what stands out is its ability to uncover these hidden connections, these universal patterns, the S-curves in learning and markets, the feedback loops driving climate change and anxiety, the phase transitions in physics and politics. It's like it gives us X-ray vision into the underlying structures of reality.
It's a tool designed to spark those aha moments for you, the listener, to help structure knowledge, accelerate your understanding, whether you're learning quantum physics or just trying to understand the economy or even your own mind.
Absolutely. It offers these powerful bridges across huge conceptual gaps. But as we spent a lot of time discussing, that power comes with real responsibility. We have to remember that every analogy is, in a sense, a beautiful lie.
A fiction we tell ourselves to grasp a piece of the truth.
Exactly. The map is useful, maybe even essential, but we can never forget it's not the territory itself. We have to respect the limits.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to chew on. We've seen how ANLG AI can synthesize incredibly complex ideas by mapping them onto things we humans already understand through our experiences, dance, ecosystems, bathtubs. It relies on our existing library of concepts.
But what happens if ANLG AI keeps evolving? What if it starts detecting patterns, maybe in deep space cosmology, or quantum field theory, or complex systems dynamics? Patterns that are real, but for which we humans simply have no existing analogy in our repertoire. No dance, no ecosystem, no familiar source concept that shares the same structure.
Could there be fundamental truths about the universe, patterns the AI can recognize mathematically or structurally that remain forever locked away from human comprehension, simply because we lack the right key, the right experiential source domain? Even with our powerful conceptual translator trying to help, what realities might lie beyond the reach of any analogy we can currently conceive?
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
This is DigitView.